everyone. I'm almost done here, wrapping up with the preparation of material that's going to be bedding for the for my two new worm bins. And my two new worm bins that I'm referring to are these two taller bins here, the one from April 4th and the one from April 12th. But in terms of what we're doing today, we're going to be harvesting all of the castings from all of those April bins. That one's April 14th. So there's really just between the 4th and the 14th, there's only 10 days difference in the age of those bins. So I'm going to scoop out all of the worms from their feeding zones in those bins. And rather than, I'm going to be breaking from my normal harvesting method, which is to use the light and the sifting and all that other baloney. These two bins had been set up for a horizontal migration, which means I was only feeding on one far end of the bin. And I did check in on those bins recently, and I did see that there is practically no worms in the castings. All the worms have made their way over to the feeding zones. So this is going to be, I guess, the objective of doing a horizontal migration is to not have to sift, and the whole idea is to let the worms do all the work, and they move over to the feeding zone and leave your castings ready for use without any sifting being needed. So that's the approach that I'm taking. If I see worms in the castings, it's just going to be part of the game. I'm not going to worry about it. So it's going to be worms go here, castings go there. And then when we take all the worms from those three bins and have them in just a big mass, I'm going to split that entire group of worms into two halves and just start off two bins. So I'm really going to be consolidating two, which is going to be a little bit simpler for me. I'm going to go from three bins to down to two, giving me a total of 4 bins in my entire setup. So I'm all set with the this bedding material now. So I'm going to put it over here on the side, and now I could just show you what else I have here. I have some leaves from outside, dry leaves, coffee grounds. There's little chunks of cardboard over there. This is some kitchen scraps, mostly melon and banana, mostly melon. And this stuff came out of the outside composter, out of the compost tumbler. I sifted that material down and got a really nice fine compost out of that. But these were the larger chunks that didn't get broken down. And since these are new bins and they'll be in service for a while, it seemed like I'd give the worms a crack at trying to break down a lot of this material. Larger size sticks, a lot of pistachio shells, even probably stuff that I would guess a squirrel probably hid that into the compost, trying to put it aside for winter. But I'm taking all this and I'm going to treat all of this as bedding / food material. All right, so why don't we get going? A lot of explanation. We should get right to work and put our money where our mouth is, right? So let's get to work. Okay. Bin number 1. So as we all know, the reason for doing a horizontal migration like we did in these few bins is to not have to sift through the compost and to simply be able to treat the compost as done. And just to demonstrate, I did this the other day already. Let's bring this a little closer here. I already went into the compost and I dug up down deep and I pulled out sort of a sampling of different areas, and you could see it's just compost. It's I did see a worm in there. Here and there you see a straggler. But at this point I believe it is fair to say that for the most part we could treat this all as castings, and we'll treat all of this as worms. Worms kind of combined with the material that made up their feeding zone previously, which is good because they'll be able to remain in a comfortable, familiar environment as they move over from one place to another. And that's what I have this bin here for, as an intermediate stop. It's going to be the place where I place the worms from each of these bins temporarily until we can prep the other bins and launch these little guys in those new spaces. So let's scoop these guys out. Chunks of food coming over. None of the chunks that I feel so far are very large. Well, here we go. Piece of corn. Feel another larger piece of corn here in my hand for this next handful right here. Okay, not bad. So I guess I'll just do one more skim along the edge here. Let's see what other volunteers I can drum up. But at this point it's starting to feel mostly like castings. Make sure we don't leave any larger chunks of food behind. Worms. And that's that for this bin. So I think that's what most of us are after in terms of the ease of harvesting our castings. But now, you know, just for full disclosure, I'm not going to just take this stuff and dump it in the garden. I'm going to treat this as more of a intermediate stage where, with the assumption that it's full of not yet hatched worm cocoons. So I do want to allow enough time so that the worm cocoons that are in here all hatch, and that I give the new hatched worms in this material a chance to migrate into a newly laid out set of bedding and food. But I'm going to do this for all of the bins with all of the compost and kind of combine it all into one mass of material and do that sort of final evacuation of all the material in one fell swoop rather than in individual bins. So in a way, I'm going to have a third bin, which is really going to be the compost itself, sort of maturing and allowing the yet unhatched worms to evacuate the material. So it's kind of what I was after all along. The whole sifting thing is a drag, takes forever. But let's do this for the other bins as well. This one's heavy. See a nice depression here where they ate most recently. This is where I put the melon peels. And they really enjoy that stuff. Alrighty. This what's coming along here is a fair amount of the fresh bedding we had laid down in these feeding zones to help contribute to its appeal. There's a lot of that material here. Here's an avocado pit. More food chunks. The last of it. Oh, I still feel some corn cobs. Here's one. Guess we'll give this one more swoop through. Here's another one, another corn cob. So just make sure we've got all of the larger food chunks taken out of here. Maybe any of these larger chunks of bedding. Oh, another big piece of corn I could feel here. Once again, we're just trying to shoot for a point where we can just say, yep, this is all castings at this point. And we could treat it as such. Let's get all of this lingering. food type, bedding type stuff out of here. Not many more worms left here. Good. Alrighty. A fair amount of castings in here. And like I said, I'm doing all three of these April bins, including this one that was not set up for a horizontal migration. This one we just got a sort of a center of the bin feeding. And then I just sort of made the decision at the last minute to just treat all of these April bins as the same, and just treat the castings around the most current feeding zone as done, so we can mainly the main reason I want to do that is to be able to consolidate from 3 bins down into 2. So one last time, we'll grab all of the emigrants. This material is, well, these are all chunks of corn here. This is where the more interesting stuff's happening, right? So let's bring it over. Yeah, big chunks of corn. Pretty big one right there. More chunks of bedding. A lot of food. Popular spot. Melon, chunks of melon peel. They are loving that stuff. All right. So easy to get distracted when you're playing around with these guys. It's just so interesting to watch them. Okay. Big chunk of corn here. Another avocado pit. You see how quickly they retreat from the bright lights, diving down. All right, let's just do one final little scoop here of the remaining uncomposted material. Let me stick that over there. Okay, that's it. How do you like that? I like that approach. It's just quick and dirty. And what that leaves us with now is a big pile of worms. And I say big, that's for sure. This container is almost full. Some good weight to it as well. So these guys will come back into play at the very end. So I'm just going to set them aside. And the next job is going to be for us to get all of these castings into one place to free up those other 2 bins over there, which is going to become the new home for the worms. So let's get to work on moving some stuff around here, and we'll check right back in when we're ready to do the consolidation of the castings material. Okay, so this container here has the castings from my last harvest, so I'm just going to use this empty container here to gather all of these castings. Guess I'll just lift it and drop it in. So, yeah, a lot of worms, but guess what? I'm not going to sweat it, because I am going to treat all of this stuff as finished castings. Finished castings and eggs or cocoons. And I'm going to give all of the inhabitants and future inhabitants a chance to exit the material, and also give the material a chance to sort of air out and dry a bit. Not that it's so wet, but it is maybe a little more moist than it needs to be, I think. I guess we should also mention that this was not the bin set up for horizontal migration. Corn. Oh, it just falls, just falls in my hand. So I'm gonna treat this up as just food for sure. Over there. Okay, just seeing if I'm worms on the ride. Back here now, we're getting down to the worms and material. Making order sort of hybrid solution will work best, right? Get a scoop of material plus food and worms, and treat guys also cooking as worms. And then scoop out stuff off to the side here has been standing frozen in the feed zone for the longest time. And treat guys almost straight compost that we have here. So you can see this, worms are getting a hole. And then you just stuff in between. This is only popular, of course, treat guys the only section that require medium, like harvesting approach or whatever. Again, three like harvesting approaches. I guess I'm labor intensive and want to avoid if possible. Let's see that. Get so much of this. Out. A little bit. Place into. Still want to try to chalk this all up as, you know, coming up with a good prototype or, you know, sort of a proof of concept sequence of steps that doesn't require a great deal of work, still, you know, produces the desired results. You know, which of my which of my processes wouldn't really work very well in that sort of a environment. Okay. The material is very nice. And there are very few worms in it, full of cocoons, which it's just a matter of time before they sprout or whatever they do, hatch. Okay. So once again, there's stuff. More worms across now. I almost don't mind overfilling those a bit. Let me just take all this material here. This seems to be mostly lingering amounts of food and bedding. Just remove it from what we've already deemed to be castings. And it's been. Let's see if we can get all this material. This last one seems to fit in. This seems like too much to fit those. Let's try. See how it goes. Right now we got to set up a new home for these guys, and it's going to be this bin right here that we just emptied, as well as the other large bins. So I'm going to go outside, rinse these off with the garden hose, and we'll be right back to tend with these guys. All right, see you in a little bit. Okay, voila. Clean as a whistle, or at least clean enough for worm composting, right? So we're just going to put that bin back in the thing, but these are the bins we're going to set up the new environments in for the worms. This here we're going to use half of the material that we have in here. This was those leaf bags that we tore up into shreds. Okay, should be a nice little lower layer of bedding for them. We'll leave enough to build the other bin. I guess the next thing I want to use is some food. Okay, so this stuff's been sitting out here thawing for a little while. I'm going to try to create sort of a savory space for them to come to. There's a chunk of corn, some banana. so. Okay. Just trying to lay down a sort of a level space onto which I could lay down some of this next type of material, which is this stuff that came out of the composter, the circulating composter outside. A combination of bedding slash food for them. Should work pretty good. Spread this out a bit. This is already like pre-composted material, so this stuff should really be appealing to the worms. Put in some grit. And here I've also got coffee grounds. Okay. Alrighty. I think we're almost at that point where get this bedding material a little further pressed down where it belongs, down low. And what I have remaining at the end is going to be a bunch of leaves just for cover, just as a more soft sort of a top layer. Let's dump that in here as well. This is about maybe half of the box. Let's just grab another handful here, or two. This should be just fine. Okay, so that's going to be bin number 1. We'll set that aside for now. And I'm going to rig up bin number 2 really quick. But let's save you the repeat material and get back as soon as we're done with this. Okay, so in goes the last of the materials, the leaves on top. Okay. Compare them for weight. I did try to distribute the materials as evenly as I could, so I think we've got 2 almost identically configured bins. So why don't we just proceed with releasing the worms? That's what everyone came for after all, aren't they? Okay, here we go. Wow, this is going to be a big mass of worms. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just create a crevice right down the middle. Into which we can drop all of this food and worm. So I guess what we're after is approximately half of this container. So let's see how that goes. Avocado pit. tell you, I'll be glad to see it when these corn cobs are finally consumed. They seem like they're taking forever. Some more bedding material. I'll take one last scoop or two. That should really account for approximately 50% of what we took out of those other 3 bins. And I would say no need to feed here for quite a while. I bet you I could probably let these bins go for a couple weeks at least before needing to feed. Okay, so that's about half. We'll leave the remainder of the material for the other bin. So let's cover these guys up, and that's the official launch of bin number 1 for today. Okay, I don't know if we're going to need the feeding zone marker necessarily. I do have one handy though if we try to stick to tradition. I fed in the middle, so we'll put that there to indicate so. Alright, let's do the next one. Okay, now I guess with this next one we could do this one in a way where we simply dump everything out at once. I guess we could just upend the entire pile and just drop them in and see what we get. Looks like we got most of them. Let's spread out the mass and see what we have. Wow. Feel lots of corn and chunks of bedding. I think that's about it for today, so why don't we cover these guys up and put them back up on the shelf and call it a day. So as you know, we've still got a little bit of unfinished business here. We've got to set up some sort of a system that's going to permit the stragglers in the compost behind me to sort of evacuate the material, and then at some point down the road I'll really be able to treat that material as compost only, because right now it's mainly a mix of compost with worms in it. So at some point in the near future, maybe I'll film that as well. I'll be getting back to these bins in order to help extract the material out and leave the worms behind as much as possible. So that's it for today, everyone. Thanks for sticking along with me and watching. If you liked it, if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, and I guess we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye now.